Are you sure we want to go in there? Lisa's voice trembled in the darkness, her hands gripping the flashlight tightly, the beam wavering unsteadily in the air. Alan stopped in his tracks and looked back at her. We've come this far, we can't give up now. Lisa gazed at the abandoned theater shrouded in fog ahead, a feeling of indescribable dread rising within her. The theater's silhouette loomed faintly in the dim moonlight, resembling a giant beast waiting to devour its prey. This theater had been abandoned in their town for decades. Legend had it that the theater owner went mad during a performance, killing all the actors and audience members before committing suicide on stage. Since then, the theater had remained closed. Maybe it's just a boring legend. Alan tried to calm Lisa down, but we have to check it out ourselves. They stepped through the theater's main door, greeted by a musty, decaying odor. The theater lobby was empty, with only a few rats gnawing at something in the corner. Alan turned on his phone's flashlight, the beam weak in the darkness, illuminating peeling wallpaper and broken furniture that hinted at the theater's former glory and its current desolation. We should split up, Alan suggested. It'd be more efficient. Split up? Lisa hesitated, her eyes full of concern. Are you sure that's wise? Alan nodded. We're just looking for anything suspicious. It won't take long. He forced a smile, trying to reassure her. Lisa took a deep breath and turned on her own flashlight, heading upstairs. Each step on the theater's staircase creaked ominously, as if it could collapse at any moment. Her heartbeat quickened with every step, feeling as though something was watching her from the shadows. On the second-floor hallway, Lisa's flashlight beam fell on a half-open door. She pushed it open to reveal a dusty dressing room filled with cobwebs. The mirror on the wall was covered in a thick layer of dust, but she could still vaguely see her reflection. She approached the mirror and noticed faint writing on its surface. She gently wiped the dust away, revealing the words "Help me" written in smudged letters. Lisa gasped, her heart racing. She didn't dare to think too much and ran out of the dressing room. However, as she stepped through the door, she felt a cold hand grab her shoulder. Lisa screamed and spun around, but there was nothing there. Her breath came in quick gasps, her heart pounding in her chest. She told herself it must have been a hallucination, but the icy touch lingered on her shoulder. She quickly ran towards the stairs, intending to find Alan. Meanwhile, Alan was searching the corridors on the first floor. At the end of the hallway, he found the locked room. He tried to push the door open, but it seemed to be blocked by something. Just then, he heard a low laugh behind him. Alan whipped around, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, but there was nothing there. The laughter stopped as abruptly as it had started. He told himself it was just his nerves and continued his search. He discovered another door on the side of the hallway, leading to a storage room filled with old props. The room smelled musty, and dust swirled in the air. Alan found a broken puppet in a corner, its painted smile disturbingly eerie. As he meticulously examined every corner of the room, he suddenly heard Lisa calling his name from upstairs. Her voice was filled with fear and urgency. He immediately rushed out of the room and ran upstairs. He found a terrified Lisa at the top of the stairs, clutching his arm. Alan, this place is haunted. Her voice trembled, her eyes wide with fear. Alan tried to calm her down. Take it easy. Lisa, tell me what happened. Lisa, still panting, recounted her experience in the dressing room. Alan's expression grew serious. He realized things were worse than he had thought. We need to get out of here, Alan said. This place is too dangerous. Lisa nodded in agreement, but just as they were about to leave, the theater's main door slammed shut with a deafening bang. They were trapped inside the eerie theater, the darkness and fear enveloping them like an invisible net. Alan searched the corridors on the first floor, his heart filled with unease and anticipation. At the end of the hallway was a locked room. He tried to push the door open, but it seemed to be blocked by something. Just then, he heard a low chuckle behind him. Alan whipped around, his flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, but there was nothing there. The laughter ceased. He told himself it was just his imagination and continued his search. The hallway lights flickered intermittently, and picture frames hung askew on the walls, their images blurred and indistinct. Alan's footsteps echoed through the empty corridor, each step quickening his heartbeat. Just as he was about to reach the end of the hallway, he felt a cold breeze behind him. He turned around to find the corridor lights completely out, and a vague figure looming in the darkness. Alan tightened his grip on the flashlight, cautiously moving forward to get a better look. But as he approached, the figure vanished, leaving only an empty hallway. Alan took a deep breath, telling himself not to be frightened. He continued forward, finally reaching the locked room. He pushed against the door, which creaked heavily before opening a crack. He shone his flashlight inside, revealing a room cluttered with old furniture and props. He carefully stepped inside, searching for any clues. Just then, he heard the door slam shut behind him. He spun around to find the door closed. Alan's heart raced, feeling an invisible pressure closing in on him. He tried to force the door open, but it seemed stuck. He pounded on the door, shouting Lisa's name, hoping she would hear him. But the theater's walls absorbed all sound, leaving the outside silent. Meanwhile, Lisa paced the second-floor hallway, her heart full of fear and anxiety. Her flashlight beam fell on a half-open door. She pushed it open to reveal a dusty dressing room filled with cobwebs. The mirror on the wall was covered in a thick layer of dust, but she could still vaguely see her reflection. She approached the mirror and noticed faint writing on its surface. She gently wiped the dust away, revealing the words "Help me" written in smudged letters. Lisa gasped, her heart racing. She didn't dare think too much and ran out of the dressing room. However, as she stepped through the door, she felt a cold hand grab her shoulder. Lisa screamed and spun around, but there was nothing there. Her breath came in quick gasps, her heart pounding in her chest. She told herself it must have been a hallucination, but the icy touch lingered on her shoulder. She quickly ran downstairs, intending to find Alan, but when she reached the first floor, she found the corridor pitch black, and Alan was nowhere to be seen. She called out his name, but there was no response. Lisa felt helpless, unsure of what to do. Just then, she heard a whispering sound, as if someone were speaking softly in her ear. Lisa stepped back in fear, her flashlight beam darting through the darkness, as if something were moving around. She turned to run but slipped and fell to the ground. Struggling to get up, Lisa found herself among a pile of old props. She saw a puppet staring at her, its eyes seemingly fixed on her. A chill ran down her spine. She quickly got up and continued searching for Alan. Meanwhile, Alan was still trapped in the locked room, feeling waves of coldness closing in from all sides, as if countless eyes were watching him from the darkness. He kept pounding on the door, shouting Lisa's name, hoping to get her attention. Suddenly, he heard footsteps outside the door. Alan's heart lit up with hope. He banged on the door harder and shouted, "Lisa, is that you? Help me open the door." The footsteps approached but stopped just outside the door. Alan held his breath, waiting for the door to open. However, a low chuckle echoed from outside, sending chills down his spine. Alan felt a strong sense of foreboding. He took a few steps back, gripping his flashlight tightly. At that moment, the door was suddenly flung open, and a shadowy figure stood in the doorway. Alan's flashlight beam fell on the figure, but he couldn't make out its face. The figure slowly advanced towards him. Overwhelmed with fear, Alan yielded and bolted from the room. He ran down the corridor trying to find an exit, but the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, each step feeling like trudging through mud. Just as he was about to despair, he saw Lisa's figure, Lisa saw Alan too and called out his name. The two finally reunited. Alan grabbed Lisa's hand tightly. "We have to get out of here. It's not safe." Lisa nodded, and they supported each other as they ran towards the theater's main door. However, when they reached the door, they found it locked. Trapped in the eerie, terrifying theater, the darkness seemed to close in around them. The theater was suffused with an oppressive atmosphere, as if the very air had grown heavy. Alan and Lisa stood before the locked door, their breaths quick and hearts pounding. The darkness around them felt like an invisible net, enveloping them tightly. "What do we do now?" Lisa's voice trembled with fear. "We need to find another way out." Alan tried to calm himself, recalling the theater's layout in his mind, searching for possible escape routes. They decided to continue exploring the theater's interior corridors, looking for any possible exit. They moved cautiously, their flashlight beams sweeping through the darkness, attempting to catch any signs of movement. Suddenly, they heard the sound of heavy footsteps at the end of the corridor. They stopped, holding their breath, trying to discern the source of the noise. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by a strange whispering, as if someone was chanting an incantation. "Let's go," Alan whispered urgently, pulling Lisa into a nearby room. They shut the door and hid behind it, struggling to steady their breathing. The room was pitch black, illuminated only by the weak light from their flashlights. Alan and Lisa huddled together, feeling each other's heartbeat. The footsteps halted outside the door, and the whispers became clearer. "They're in here," a low voice said, its tone icy. "We can't let them escape," another voice responded, filled with malice. Alan and Lisa exchanged a terrified glance, understanding that whoever was outside was not friendly. They needed to find a way out fast. The room seemed to be a storage space filled with old props and miscellaneous items. Alan's flashlight beam scanned the room, looking for another exit. They found a small window on one side, but it was barred with iron grates. "We need to get out of here," Alan whispered, "or they'll find us eventually." Lisa nodded, trying to calm herself. She scanned the room, looking for anything they could use. Suddenly, she spotted a crowbar in a corner. "There's a crowbar over there," Lisa whispered urgently. Alan quickly grabbed the crowbar and began prying at the iron bars. Despite the rust, the bars were still very sturdy. Alan exerted all his strength, the crowbar screeching as it bent the bars. Finally, the bars began to give way. Just then, the footsteps outside grew louder, approaching the room. Alan worked faster, and the bars finally opened a small gap. "Quick, Lisa, go first," Alan urged. Lisa climbed onto the windowsill and squeezed through the narrow opening. She felt the cold night air, a glimmer of hope rising within her. Alan followed closely behind, managing to escape through the window. They found themselves outside the theater, finally free from its oppressive atmosphere. Moonlight bathed them, bringing a sense of relief. However, they knew the real danger was not over yet. "We need to call the police," Lisa said urgently. "Tell them what's happening here." Alan nodded. "Yes, we need to get out of here as soon as possible." They hurried along the theater's perimeter path, hearing the theater door slam shut behind them. They dared not look back, only hoping to reach safety quickly. Just then, they heard the low rumble of an engine in the distance. An old truck drove into the theater's parking lot, its headlights piercing through the darkness. "We need to hide," Alan pulled Lisa, quickly ducking into a nearby thicket. The truck stopped, and a few figures emerged, carrying flashlights as they began searching around the theater. Alan and Lisa held their breath, trying to remain as silent as possible. "They must be nearby," a gruff voice said. "We can't let them get away." Alan and Lisa felt a chill at these words. It was clear these people were not ordinary visitors. They must be connected to the horrors within the theater. They moved cautiously, trying to stay out of sight. Alan silently vowed to protect Lisa and get her to safety no matter what. Night enveloped the theater, the air heavy with an oppressive feeling. Alan and Lisa had escaped outside, bathed in moonlight, which offered them a semblance of comfort. However, they knew the real danger was far from over. "We need to call the police," Lisa said urgently. "Let them know what's happening here." Alan nodded, pulling Lisa along the theater's perimeter path. They had just taken a few steps when they heard the low rumble of an engine in the distance. An old truck drove into the theater's parking lot, its headlights glaring in the darkness. "We need to hide," Alan said, dragging Lisa into a nearby thicket. The truck stopped, and a few figures emerged, flashlights in hand, beginning to search the area around the theater. Alan and Lisa held their breath, trying to remain as silent as possible. "They must be around here somewhere," a gruff voice said. "We can't let them get away." Alan and Lisa felt a chill at these words. It was clear these people were not ordinary visitors. They must be connected to the horrors within the theater. Alan silently vowed to protect Lisa and get her to safety no matter what. The figures from the truck began to search more thoroughly, their flashlight beams sweeping back and forth in the darkness, illuminating the edge of the thicket. Alan and Lisa huddled deeper into the underbrush, trying to stay calm. Every time the flashlight beams neared, they held their breath, not daring to make a sound. "You two, check over there," the leader commanded, pointing towards the thicket. Two figures approached the thicket, their flashlight beams dancing in the dark. Alan gripped Lisa's hand tightly, signaling her to stay silent. As the flashlight beams drew closer, Alan whispered to Lisa, "We need to run when they look away." Lisa nodded, determination gleaming in her eyes. They waited for the perfect moment. As soon as the flashlight beams shifted away, Alan pulled Lisa, and they darted out of the thicket, sprinting towards the distant woods. Behind them, they heard shouts and the sound of footsteps. "Quick, catch them," the gruff voice yelled. Alan and Lisa ran desperately, the branches and underbrush scratching at their skin, but they ignored the pain, focused only on escaping their pursuers. The moonlight filtering through the trees provided a faint, guiding path. They ran for what felt like an eternity, until they could no longer hear the footsteps and shouts behind them. They stopped to catch their breath. Alan, gasping, said, "We can't stop here. They'll find us soon." Lisa nodded, exhausted but understanding the urgency. They continued through the forest, eventually coming across a clearing with an old abandoned cabin. The cabin looked dilapidated, with broken windows and doors hanging off their hinges, but it offered a temporary refuge. Alan and Lisa cautiously entered the cabin, finding it filled with dust and cobwebs. They found a relatively clean corner to sit and rest. Alan pulled out his phone but found there was no signal. "There's no signal here. We can't call the police," Alan said, frustrated. Lisa looked up, eyes filled with despair. "What do we do now? They'll find us soon." Alan thought for a moment. "We need to keep moving, find a place with a signal. Once we can contact the outside world, we have a chance." Lisa nodded. After resting briefly, they decided to leave the cabin and continue their search for a way out. Just as they were about to leave, they heard footsteps outside. "They're here," Lisa whispered in fear. Alan thought for a moment. "We need to keep moving, find a place with a signal. Once we can contact the outside world, we have a chance." Lisa nodded. After resting briefly, they decided to leave the cabin and continue their search for a way out. Just as they were about to leave, they heard footsteps outside. "They're here," Lisa whispered in fear. Alan and Lisa huddled together, holding their breath, listening to the sounds of the intruders searching the cabin. The flashlight beams swept through the room, illuminating every corner. Alan's heart pounded. He knew if they were found, there would be no escape. Just as the flashlight beams were about to reveal their hiding spot, a sharp scream echoed from outside. The intruders stopped their search immediately, and the flashlight beams shifted away. "What's happening outside?" one voice asked, confused. "Go check it out," another voice ordered. The intruders quickly left the cabin, their footsteps fading into the distance. Alan and Lisa let out a sigh of relief, but they knew this reprieve was temporary. They had to leave quickly. "We need to move," Alan whispered. "While they're distracted, we need to find a safer place." Lisa nodded, and they quietly slipped out of the cabin, continuing along the edge of the forest. The night air was cold, and they shivered, but they knew they had to keep moving to stay ahead of their pursuers. After a long walk, they finally reached a small road. Alan checked his phone again and found a weak signal. He quickly dialed 911, explaining their situation and location to the dispatcher. "The police will be here soon," Alan said, feeling a sense of relief. Lisa felt a bit of hope, but they knew the danger wasn't completely over. They decided to keep moving, finding a safer place to wait for the police. They continued along the road, suddenly hearing the rumble of an engine behind them. Turning around, they saw the old truck speeding towards them, its headlights blinding in the darkness. "Run!" Alan shouted, grabbing Lisa's hand as they sprinted forward. The truck closed in rapidly, almost catching up to them. Just then, a police car appeared ahead, its lights flashing red and blue. The police car screeched to a halt in front of them, and several officers jumped out, blocking the truck's path. The truck was forced to stop, and the police quickly surrounded it. Alan and Lisa finally let out a breath of relief, running towards the police and recounting their harrowing experience. The police swiftly arrested the people from the truck and took Alan and Lisa to the station for a full statement. At the police station, Alan and Lisa described in detail their terrifying ordeal in the theater. The police launched an investigation, discovering that the theater indeed harbored dark secrets. In the end, the theater was shut down, and those involved were brought to justice. Alan and Lisa had survived the nightmare, knowing that this experience would forever be etched in their memories, a shadow that would never completely fade. Alan and Lisa experienced a period of anxious waiting as the police conducted their investigation. The case progressed quickly, and the theater's secrets were gradually revealed. Yet, despite the help from the authorities, they still felt a lingering unease. With the police's assistance, Alan and Lisa finally returned to their home, but the horrifying memories of the theater continued to haunt them. Though the outside world seemed to return to normal, they knew that the hidden darkness still existed. A few days later, Alan received a mysterious letter. The envelope had no return address, only an address and a brief message. "If you want to know the truth, come here." The letter was simple yet eerie, sending a shiver down Alan and Lisa's spines. "What is this?" Lisa asked, her fingers trembling as she took the letter. "I don't know," Alan replied, "but we should check it out." They decided to follow the address on the letter. It led them to an abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city, once a bustling industrial area now left desolate and dilapidated. When they arrived at the factory, the sky was already dark, and the factory's silhouette looked particularly sinister in the twilight. Alan and Lisa stood before the heavy factory doors, feeling a growing sense of unease. "Are we really going in there?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. "We have no other choice," Alan said firmly. "This letter might be our only clue to uncovering the truth." They steeled themselves and pushed open the heavy door, which creaked ominously as if announcing their arrival. The interior of the factory was shrouded in darkness, with only a few strands of moonlight filtering through broken windows. They took out their flashlights, their beams cutting through the gloom of the factory. Inside, the factory was filled with dust and rust, with broken machinery and discarded equipment scattered across the floor. The air was thick with the stench of rust and decay. "It looks like it's been abandoned for a long time," Lisa said quietly. "Yes," Alan nodded. but we have to keep moving." They proceeded cautiously through the factory, occasionally stopping to check their surroundings. Suddenly, they heard a low murmuring sound, as if someone was whispering. "Did you hear that?" Lisa asked nervously. "I did," Alan responded, "but the sound is too faint. We need to find where it's coming from." The sound seemed to be coming from deeper within the factory. They followed the direction of the sound, moving through a deserted workshop filled with debris. The floor was littered with scraps of wood and broken machine parts. Eventually, they arrived at a small, enclosed room. The door was locked with an iron chain, and an old, tattered note was posted on it, reading, "You are not welcome here." Lisa felt a wave of fear. What does this mean? Maybe we should just leave. Alan, however, was determined. This note could be a warning, but it might also be the key to the truth. He tried to open the chain with effort and cautiously pushed open the door. The room was filled with dust and smelled musty. The walls were covered with old photographs and handwritten notes. Alan and Lisa approached the photos, discovering that they were old images of the theater, including some blurry black and white shots. "What are these?" Lisa asked, her voice filled with surprise and confusion. "These are historical photographs of the theater," Alan explained, "and it looks like these people might be connected to the theater's past." They examined the photos and notes more closely and found some strange details. The figures in the photos all appeared to be associated with theater performances, but there was one figure that appeared in every photo. This person was dressed in a tattered costume, their face blurred, but their eyes conveyed an unsettling coldness. "Who is this person?" Lisa asked. "I don't know," Alan replied, "but they seem significant. Maybe they are connected to the terror at the theater." As they continued to read the notes, they uncovered some unsettling revelations. The notes detailed that the theater was once a base for a secret organization that conducted mysterious and dark rituals. The purpose of these rituals was to gain some ancient power, but they eventually went out of control, leading to the theater's curse. "These rituals," Lisa's voice quivered, "they sound terrifying." "Yes," Alan nodded, "these rituals might be the source of the theater's horror." Just then, they heard hurried footsteps approaching. Alan and Lisa quickly hid the notes and photos and crouched in a corner of the room. The footsteps grew closer, and it sounded like someone was searching for them. The door was pushed open, and a few figures entered the room. Alan and Lisa held their breath, trying to stay as quiet as possible. The figures seemed to be searching for something but did not find their hiding spot. "Where are they?" one voice asked. "I don't know," another voice responded, "but we have to find them." Alan and Lisa felt a surge of anxiety, knowing they needed to leave quickly. They waited until the footsteps faded away before cautiously emerging from their hiding spot. "We need to get out of here," Alan whispered. "Those people are probably connected to the theater's events." Lisa nodded, and they quickly left the factory and got back to their car. They decided to hand over the documents they found to the police, hoping that it would help them uncover the truth behind the theater's terrifying events. Back at home, Alan and Lisa presented the photos and notes to the police. The authorities launched a further investigation, revealing that these materials indeed uncovered the theater's dark history. In the end, the police discovered an ancient secret society hidden within the theater. The members of this society had performed forbidden rituals within the theater, resulting in its curse and the ensuing horror. Those involved were brought to justice, and the theater's dark history was finally exposed. Alan and Lisa had endured much through this nightmare, but they knew that it was now behind them. They hoped for a future free of the haunting shadows of their past, seeking peace and tranquility in the days to come. With the theater's secrets unveiled, Alan and Lisa began to slowly regain their sense of calm. However, The memory of that night was still deeply etched in their minds, and they knew that the darkness they had encountered would not easily fade. A few weeks later, Alan and Lisa decided to go on a vacation to the seaside, hoping that being away from the city's chaos would help alleviate their inner anxieties. They chose a remote little town, known for its picturesque scenery and quiet ambience. Upon arriving at their seaside vacation home, an old wooden house perched on a cliff overlooking the vast ocean, they felt a sense of relief. The house was cozy, and the surroundings were tranquil, offering a much-needed respite from their recent ordeal. "This is such a perfect place," Lisa remarked. "It feels like we can temporarily forget everything here." "Indeed," Alan agreed. "We need this time to relax and recharge." However, despite the peaceful surroundings, their inner shadows were difficult to fully dispel. Alan and Lisa dealt with their unease in different ways. Alan immersed himself in writing, documenting their experiences in an attempt to transform their pain into words. Lisa, on the other hand, expressed her emotions through painting, often depicting the eerie dreams and shadows that haunted her. One evening, as Lisa was working in her studio, she suddenly felt a profound sense of unease. She put down her paintbrush and looked around, sensing an unfamiliar presence in the air. Moving to the window, she peered out at the ocean and noticed some indistinct shadows drifting in the distance. "Alan, come here," Lisa called out, her voice tinged with anxiety. Alan hurried to the studio, finding Lisa at the window, staring intently at the distant sea. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I see something strange." Lisa pointed at the ocean. "There are shadows floating out there." Alan approached the window and looked out at the sea. In the darkness, he could indeed see some indistinct shapes moving amidst the waves, but due to the distance, he couldn't discern what they were. It might just be a trick of the light, Alan tried to reassure Lisa, or something floating on the water. Even so, Lisa's anxiety did not abate. She returned to her painting, but the feeling of unease continued to linger. The next day, Alan and Lisa decided to explore the town to distract themselves. Although the town was small, it had a unique charm with its old streets and cozy shops, providing them with a sense of relaxation. However, despite the normalcy of the world outside, their inner fears remained palpable. That evening, they returned to the vacation home as night fell, with the sea breeze howling outside the windows. Lisa, still unable to shake her unease, decided to go for a walk by the beach in hopes of finding some peace. Seeing Lisa's decision, Alan chose to accompany her. They walked along the coastline, with the waves crashing against the shore and the night sky adorned with stars. The moonlight shimmered on the sea, creating a tranquil scene. However, as they reached a secluded bay, Lisa suddenly stopped and said in a low voice, "Alan, I have a bad feeling." "What's wrong?" Alan asked, concerned. "I'm not sure," Lisa replied. "I just feel like something is off here, like there's something wrong." Alan looked around. Apart from the sound of the waves and the wind, there were no other noises. He tried to comfort Lisa. "Maybe you were just tired and overthinking things. Let's head back." As they turned to leave, a sudden and fierce storm rolled in. The calm sea became turbulent, and dark clouds obscured the moon, turning the bay into a foreboding and sinister place. Alan and Lisa were forced to stop and seek shelter. "We need to find a place to take cover," Alan shouted over the storm. "Let's find somewhere safe." They searched around and eventually found an old lighthouse on one side of the bay. The door was slightly ajar, and they hurried inside to escape the storm. The interior of the lighthouse was dim and damp, with only a small amount of light filtering through broken windows. They found a dry spot on the lighthouse's lower level and sat down to rest. The storm raged outside, with the sounds of the tempest echoing through the lighthouse. "This is such a terrible night," Lisa said, her voice trembling. "Yes," Alan agreed. but at least we're safe here. Suddenly, Alan heard an unfamiliar sound. It seemed to come from the upper levels of the lighthouse, resembling a murmured chant or incantation. Alan and Lisa exchanged worried glances, their unease growing. "Did you hear that?" Lisa asked. "Yes," Alan responded. "Let's go check it out." They carefully climbed the stairs to the lighthouse's top, where the sound grew clearer. The stairs led to a room filled with old books and instruments. The sound seemed to be coming from a dusty old desk. Alan and Lisa approached the desk and discovered an ancient book lying on it. The book was covered with strange symbols and writings, and its cover bore a design similar to the symbols they had seen at the theater. "What is this?" Lisa asked quietly. "This book seems to be related to the theater's secrets," Alan speculated. "It might contain what we need to understand." They carefully opened the book and found that it described ancient rituals and incantations. The purpose of these rituals was to summon some ancient powers, but these powers were uncontrollable, leading to the theater's curse. "These rituals mentioned in this book," Alan said, "are similar to the ones we found in the theater." Lisa nodded. "Perhaps this book can help us understand those mysterious events." Just then, the storm outside intensified, and the lighthouse began to shake violently. Alan and Lisa felt a surge of panic, realizing that the storm could cause significant damage to the lighthouse. "We need to get out of here quickly," Alan shouted. "This lighthouse might collapse." They quickly left the lighthouse and fought their way back through the storm to the vacation home. Amidst the storm, they clung to each other for stability. Finally, they made it safely back to the house. After the storm, Alan and Lisa realized that these dark forces were not confined to the theater. Their influence could extend elsewhere. Although they had uncovered the theater's secrets, these secrets seemed to be following them. They decided to hand the book over to experts for further study, hoping it would shed more light on these mysterious powers. The analysis confirmed that the book revealed ancient rituals and powers, but many details remained unclear. Ultimately, Alan and Lisa returned to their normal lives, but they knew that the shadows of darkness might reappear unexpectedly. Nevertheless, they understood that facing and exploring these unknown forces with courage was the only way to eventually find true peace. After returning from their vacation, Alan and Lisa resumed their normal lives, but the shadows of their past experiences continued to linger. They tried to lead a peaceful life, but the darkness they had encountered seemed to follow them, refusing to fade completely. One day, Alan received a letter from a distant place. The envelope bore a strange address and name, which made Alan uneasy. He carefully opened the envelope and pulled out the letter, finding a brief yet mysterious note inside. "Dear Alan and Lisa, you have witnessed the truth of darkness, but that is only the tip of the iceberg. The real darkness still awaits you in the abyss. If you wish to uncover deeper secrets, head to the Ilia mountains, where shadows will reveal more to you. Warning, do not trust easily what you see, for truth often hides in the darkest depths. Sincerely, a knowledgeable one." The letter was neatly written but carried a sense of mystery and threat. Alan and Lisa exchanged puzzled and worried glances. Although they hoped to distance themselves from these dark experiences, the letter's warning and hints made it impossible to ignore. "Ilia Mountains," Lisa said softly. "It's a very remote place. Do we really want to go?" Alan pondered for a moment and decided perhaps this letter is the key to understanding these secrets further. If we don't check it out, we might never know the full truth. After some discussion, Alan and Lisa decided to head to the Ilia Mountains to explore the abyss mentioned in the letter. They packed their bags, prepared some essentials including maps, food, and a first aid kit. The next morning, they set off on their journey to the mountains. The Ilia Mountains were located in a remote region with rugged terrain and picturesque scenery. The roads were winding and treacherous, flanked by dense forests and rugged peaks. As they drove into the mountains, the surroundings became increasingly desolate, and the temperature began to drop. At the foot of the mountain, they found a small inn to rest and prepare for the next day's exploration. The innkeeper, an elderly man, seemed surprised by their arrival. "You're going to the Ilia mountains?" the old man asked. "The paths there are very dangerous. Maybe you should reconsider." "We have our reasons," Alan answered firmly. "We'll be careful." The old man shook his head and said no more. They spent the night at the inn and began their mountain exploration early the next morning. As they traveled along the winding mountain paths, Alan and Lisa gradually ventured deeper into the Ilia mountains. The air grew fresher but also carried a subtle chill. The dense trees blocked out sunlight, creating an oppressive atmosphere. They followed a narrow trail, which grew steeper and more difficult. After a strenuous climb, they arrived at a hidden valley. In the center of the valley stood an ancient stone tablet, covered in strange symbols and writings. "Is this the abyss mentioned in the letter?" Lisa asked, her voice tinged with doubt and fear. "It might be," Alan replied. "We should examine this stone tablet closely. It might provide some clues." They carefully studied the symbols on the tablet, noting that they resembled the symbols they had seen at the theater. Alan brushed off some dust from the base of the tablet and discovered a hidden slot containing a small box. Alan carefully extracted the box and opened it to find an old letter and a small wooden carving. The letter was styled similarly to the previous one but provided more detailed descriptions of the dark forces and their origins. "Dear seekers, you are about to uncover the true source of darkness. Deep within the Ilia mountains lies an ancient altar where forbidden rituals were once performed. The power of the altar far exceeds your imagination and is closely linked to the curse of the theater. At the deepest part of the altar, you will face the ultimate test. Only by revealing all the secrets can you find true liberation. Sincerely, a knowledgeable one." The letter ended with a map marking a location that appeared to be the site of the altar. Alan and Lisa decided to follow the map to that location and continue their quest. After a lengthy trek, they finally arrived at the marked site. It was a desolate valley with an ancient altar standing in the center. The altar was overgrown with moss and vines, giving it an ancient and mysterious appearance. Alan and Lisa approached the altar cautiously, feeling the atmosphere around them grow heavier. Above the altar hung a massive stone bell covered in ancient symbols and patterns. "This is the place we're looking for," Alan said, "but we need to be careful. There might be more dangers here." They began to inspect the altar, searching for any possible clues. Suddenly, a powerful storm surged in, and the air in the valley became extremely oppressive. The stone bell on the altar started to emit a deep, resonant sound, as if responding to the storm. "What is that sound?" Lisa asked in terror. "I'm not sure," Alan replied, "but we need to press on." The storm grew stronger, causing the ground in the valley to shake. Alan and Lisa discovered some ancient ritual tools around the altar, including broken pottery and decayed cloth. These tools appeared to have been used in mysterious rituals. They found strange patterns near the altar that resembled the symbols on the stone bell. Alan tried to interpret these patterns, discovering that they might be related to the symbols in the previous book. These patterns could be spell symbols used during the rituals. Alan said, "We need to understand their meaning." As they were examining these patterns, a sudden flash of intense light erupted from the center of the altar. A vague figure appeared in the light, resembling an ancient priest. The figure's face was blurred, but its gaze was filled with authority and mystery. "You have finally arrived," the priest's voice echoed through the valley. "Your arrival marks the final test." "We came seeking the truth," Alan said loudly. "Please tell us how to uncover these dark secrets." The figure of the priest gradually became clearer as he began to recount an ancient legend. The altar was once the center of an ancient cult that performed forbidden rituals to summon powerful dark forces. However, these forces went out of control, resulting in countless disasters and suffering. What you have experienced in the theater, the priest said, is merely a reflection of these dark forces. To truly free yourselves, you must confront the source of these powers and eradicate them completely. The light began to fade, and the priest's figure vanished from the valley. Alan and Lisa felt a profound sense of shock, realizing that their trials were far from over. They needed to find a way to face and eliminate these dark forces. As the storm subsided, Alan and Lisa discovered some ancient books and documents near the altar. These books described in detail how to perform rituals to drive away dark forces. Although the contents of these books were complex and difficult to understand, they believed that this information might be key to uncovering the ultimate secret. They decided to take the books back home and seek professional help to interpret them. Despite the daunting challenges ahead, Alan and Lisa were determined to continue their exploration, uncovering the true face of darkness and finding a path to liberation.